Before this episode gets started, I just want to make it clear that Portugal is a country that I love. Portugal is a country that I have felt at home and that I really enjoy. There are things that are really wonderful about living in this country, but as time has gone on, as I've kind of mentioned in some episodes, and maybe not directly, but I'm definitely going to say it in this episode, that I unfortunately feel as though I can no longer recommend moving to Portugal. I'm Rafael Di Furia, and welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. Roll that intro. I think what it comes down to for me is that years and years ago when I first visited Portugal, I fell in love with Portugal once was, and I feel as though it's changed and moved into a very different direction and has become something different and is becoming even more so that something different. Like in so many episodes where I've mentioned my concerns about living in Portugal, the cost of living is definitely still at the top. I mean, in comparison to what you used to find in the country, granted everywhere in the world right now, you're finding that the cost of living has changed. But I would say even it feels in some ways as though it's gotten higher, more so than in some other places. And I'm at the point where I really don't feel as though the value for money is there. And I think this particular issue presents itself in a few ways. One of them being the kind of cost of finding an apartment. I mean, for example, even in Braga, I know a number of people who have come to find that now the prices have gone up so much for rentals and even for purchasing apartments or homes, whatever it may be, that they are looking outside of the city or just up and leaving Portugal altogether. And I can say that even my rent did increase, and it was a significant amount of money. And when you're looking at apartments in Braga and in Portugal in general, the value that used to be there just simply isn't there anymore. And it's gotten to the point where, even as I've mentioned in other episodes, that many Portuguese are finding it more and more difficult to be able to afford an apartment, afford the cost of living in Portuguese cities, and are moving outside to places that are maybe a little bit further away and maybe a little bit more affordable, or in some cases quite a bit more affordable. And there are many arguments as to why this is happening. I've heard many people saying, well, it's the foreigners are coming in, blame the foreigners, they took our jobs, and all those kind of arguments, although actually they took our jobs is just a joke in this case. Reference to South Park, if you've never seen it, long old joke. But from what I've seen as far as apartments go and the number of apartments actually being rented by foreign residents in Portugal, the numbers don't seem to add up to me. I don't have them here in front of me, and no, I've not prepared them for this episode. But what I'm saying is that something seems off, that if people are blaming the foreigners just simply for that factor alone. And I think it's important to look at kind of the holistic view of everything that exists and the overall situation. And I mean, if we look, for example, at one particular factor in a country where it seems as though most people are on a variable rate mortgage. This is something that bankers have told me. And this is based on just social interactions, not like, hey, we're at a bank, like they're trying to get me to sign some papers. It was just social kind of like, I'm curious about how things work in Portugal. What do people do? What is the norm? What is the kind of average in the country? And what was explained to me is that it seems to be the most common that people have variable rate mortgages. And over the last years, having a variable rate mortgage ended up being a better option for many people and proved to actually be a way better choice than a fixed rate mortgage. However, in the last few years, that seems to have flipped upside down on top of its head. And I can say I even know some people who are maybe having to pay anywhere between 125 and 200% of what they were paying before. This is a huge increase. And I would say that if you're in a country where this exists, that landlords are not going to be happy with taking a loss on their rental income that they're getting every month. I mean, especially say they're paying now $1,500-$1,600 and they're only getting, say, $1,200. You're having to pay for the right to have someone live in your apartment. That doesn't sound like a really attractive deal. But what I was saying about foreign residents coming in, purchasing properties or renting properties in Portugal, there now seems to be a lot of anti-foreigner sentiment in the country. Not that it's everywhere, not that it's everybody. And I'm not saying that all Portuguese are like this, but it's something where I feel as though I keep hearing more and more and more about people having, we'll call them incidents, about maybe somebody saying, go back to your country, or maybe something even worse that might not be YouTube friendly. So I'll leave it at that. But one thing that I feel is really unfortunate is that I hear more and more stories of service providers that end up interacting with an international clientele base, that there are more and more people feeling as though, or maybe even in fact, potentially being taken advantage of. I'm not saying that all service providers in the country do this, but I think there are enough individuals, enough, we could say, bad apples, that it's kind of spoiling the experience for many. There seems to be, of course, a perception, as in many locations around the world, that people coming from certain other locations might have a little bit more financial flexibility, or that they might be earning a higher income. And well, what does it matter if they get charged X amount more, or if you add on an extra fee of X amount? I keep seeing this more and more, hearing more stories and verifiable instances of these sorts of things happening. And unfortunately, it really, even for me, starts to kind of spoil the taste and the flavor of how wonderful I think Portugal can be, because overall, I do think the Portuguese people are very warm, very friendly, very welcoming, and very helpful to those who are coming from abroad to make a life and make an effort in the country. But I can't help but wonder if that feeling, that sentiment, that way of being is maybe starting to change just a little bit. And again, I'm not saying all people would be like this, but it's something that I keep hearing more and more and more about as time goes on. And I'm not saying that if a person were to go to Portugal that they would run into this, but I feel like the likelihood is definitely becoming higher. And in many episodes of Not Your Average Globetrotter, I've mentioned how I personally enjoy Portuguese food. I know there are many foreign residents who really don't enjoy Portuguese food, or they find that there's not maybe so much variation, or maybe one of the biggest problems I hear about, lack of salt or lack of spice, or other times maybe too much salt, especially in the case of bacalhau. Again, getting back to kind of cost of living and stuff like this, I feel as though the quality of food, especially meat, that I've been finding in Portugal doesn't necessarily line up, and even other things like ingredients or vegetables, whatever they might be, maybe vegetables, maybe more on par, but I feel as though I keep finding that for me, the quality of what I've been finding doesn't seem to match up with what can be found in other parts of Europe, as well as the cost for these things. Of course, like many places, the variety of international foods can be a problem in many countries, but finding sometimes these foreign cuisines can be a challenge, especially if you're not in one of the major cities. But even if you are in a major city, finding properly done foreign cuisine can be challenging. Maybe there are going to be certain national dishes that could be represented from certain countries that might be easier to find than others, at least properly done. One of the things that, even though I do like beef in Portugal, I've been feeling as though that more and more I keep on finding very tough, difficult to eat and very chewy meat, even in places where maybe you're spending a little bit extra for what should be a better cut. And like I was saying, I'm not saying that you're going to have the same experience that I've had. And I've never been the person to say, oh, move to Portugal, it's going to change your life. Well, actually, it would change your life, but move to Portugal, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be the best for you. I would never say that it's going to be the best choice for anybody. The right choice is going to depend on your particular set of circumstances and your life, your lifestyle, how you gel with the place. For people who do ask me about Portugal, as time has gone on, like I've said, I've been having a much more difficult time to be able to say, yes, that this is the best choice. I think as time goes on, I'm finding myself thinking that maybe there are other choices that could be better. And there are many things that bring people to Portugal, and one of those major factors will be the pace of life. But I've been finding that both in a personal and professional sense, that the pace is maybe not quite right for me. I do like being able to slow down, but it's come to the point where I've gotten used to hearing, well, oh, that'll happen tomorrow, or no, that'll happen next week. And then maybe a month or two later, things haven't been taken care of. And so I'm not saying this is all situations you'll find. I've found some people that are really amazing to work with and service providers that really are doing great things. But what I feel as though I'm running into creates extra hurdles that are unnecessary. And then also, like I was saying, in a professional sense, as I've said also in previous episodes, that Portugal is a great country to come to if you're working remotely. But if you're looking to work domestically, even if you're providing services internationally, domestically offering certain services can come with certain challenges. I mean, especially not being from the country. And then also the price point of certain things that might be a little bit different than what you might be used to or what you might be able to ask in other parts of the world. Even the experiences that I've had when trying to kind of get things started in the country, I've been running into also a work mentality that I find differences from where I come from and the background that I have. And I'm not saying from the US or from Italy or from this or from that. I'm just saying the international experiences that I've had in the 16 plus years since I've left the US, that there are things that are done differently in Portugal that are done differently in other parts of the world. Of course, I mean, anywhere you go at the end of the day, you are going to find that things are just simply done differently anywhere, that there's a particular flavor that each country has of how they take care of things. And what I'm finding is, as time goes on, as much as I love Portugal and as much as I really enjoy what can be found, there are certain things that are building up that present challenges that I don't believe are necessary or that I would be seeing in other locations. And as many of you know, I came to Portugal originally for family reasons. Of course, you can hear more about that in episode 220, but basically to kind of come help family members kind of get things going and make sure that everything was okay. But for me, Portugal, like I said, has been a country that I've had this love for a long time and really enjoyed. And again, I'm not sure if it's maybe the what Portugal was at that time that I really enjoyed. And maybe what it's becoming is not what would fit into kind of my ideal of what I'm looking for and what I'm needing from my life. Originally, my thought was that maybe when I'm retiring one day, even though I'm nowhere close to that, it was just kind of in the back of my mind, that could be a great place to go one day. That could be a great place to aim. But again, as time goes on, even I'm finding that that thought in the back of my mind is fading. It's almost completely faded, actually. I'm not sure that it's the right place that I would like to see myself in that stage of my life. I mean, even when we're talking about healthcare in the country, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, that I've had not the best experiences with trying to get appointments. Healthcare itself was fine. It was actually the care from the particular doctor that was great. However, that was when I was able to make an appointment. And even to get an appointment was months and months and months ahead. I think there was one time 6 months ahead, and then the doctor ended up being on strike that day. Another time was another 3 to 6 months ahead of time. And then the doctor was sick that day. And then another 3 to 6 months after that, she just didn't show up or she canceled. But all of these times, I didn't find out either until I showed up myself or called ahead to see what the situation was, because I didn't get any notification of what was happening or not happening. And even like one particular time that I went to go see this doctor, they weren't scheduled to be working that day. I showed up at the time that I had my appointment set for months in advance. And when I got there, they said, "Oh, well, the doctor's not supposed to be here until 2 hours after your appointment." And I was thinking, okay, that's a bit silly. And then whatever, in the end, I ended up having the appointment, but still. And again, I can say that there are other countries that I've been in and I've seen and have experienced where interaction with the public system hasn't been as difficult to access the system. So especially thinking about that stage of life where retirement and maybe you're a little older, maybe you need to see a doctor more often. Okay, fine. There's private healthcare there. But I mean, for example, there are other countries where the public systems are fine enough to be able to rely on. And as much as I do love Portugal, even though I think it may be a great option for many people, I'm no longer convinced it's the right option for me.